The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Diana Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here's a look at the leads. The Caribbean private sector organization's suggestion that Guyana's local content law violates regional free trade rules has sparked a call for this country to leave the CARICOM single market. The Shadow Attorney General, Roysdale Ford, has represented the opposition leader in talks with the Commonwealth Secretary General. A man says he faked a robbery because he was overworked and underpaid. And in regional news, a Trinidad and Tobago opposition parliamentarian wants fireworks to be banned. Cuba is rushing nurses to the Bahamas, where many of their local counterparts are COVID positive and off the job. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details coming up in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return-to-work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. The Caribbean Private Sector Organization, CPSO, is objecting to Guyana's recently passed local content legislation on the grounds that it seems to violate the Caribbean community's CARICOM free trade rules. This position has prompted the president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Timothy Tucker, to call for Guyana to leave the regional single market. CPSO President Gervais Warner states in an email that the executive committee agreed that the legislation appears to violate several provisions of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. Mr. Warner, who is also the president and the group chief executive officer of the Trinidad-headquartered Massey, said the CPSO would be raising its concerns first with the Guyana government and then ultimately to the Caribbean community. Chairman of the Bihari Group of Companies, Suresh Bihari, has been tasked by the CPSO, a member of the CARICOM Council for Trade and Economic Development, to reach out to the Guyana government on the issue. During a debate on the local content legislation, opposition, a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change parliamentarian David Patterson had warned that the legislation appeared to flout the Treaty of Chaguaramas, but Attorney General Anil Nandlal had said that would be addressed if the need arises. Shadow Attorney General Roysdale Ford has represented opposition leader Joseph Harmon in a meeting with the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Baroness Patricia Scotland. Sources say that Mr. Harmon could not attend the meeting due to an urgent medical appointment. Importantly, the meeting between Mr. Ford and Baroness Scotland was held at Congress Place, the headquarters of the People's National Congress Reform. Pressed on whether Mr. Ford is being positioned to take over the position of opposition leader from Mr. Harmon, the source said, at least, not yet. Mr. Ford had previously performed the duties of opposition leader while Mr. Harmon had been overseas. The People's National Congress Reform's Central Executive Committee had decided that its leader, Mr. Aubrey Norton, should become a parliamentarian and become the new opposition leader. Mr. Ford had been on Mr. Harmon's team at the recent contest for the post of leader and other executive members at the PNCR's recent internal elections. But after those polls, the PNCR leader co-opted Mr. Ford to sit on the Central Executive Committee. During the life of the past executive, then party leader David Granger had co-opted Mr. Harmon to sit on the PNCR's executive, and almost immediately afterwards, he had been selected and supported by the wider opposition of a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change to become opposition leader. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro is scheduled to pay a one-day visit to Guyana next week, Friday. This was confirmed by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Elizabeth Harper. Already, President Irfan Ali and President Bolsonaro have met virtually to prepare for the visit by the leader of that Portuguese-speaking nation. In that preparatory meeting, Dr. Ali listed energy, food security, telecommunication, infrastructure integration, and trade that he would like to discuss with his Brazilian counterpart. President Ali wants to discuss the possibility of Brazil assisting with the development of Guyana's bauxite and increasing the quota for rice exports under a partial scope agreement. The Brazilian leader will be visiting Suriname next Thursday before coming to Guyana the next day. Guyana is examining a proposal by a Jamaica-headquartered firm to provide crop insurance to farmers. Speaking before the Bipartisan Parliamentary Economic Services Committee, Minister of Agriculture, Zulfikar Mustafa, announced that Grace Kennedy is offering crop insurance.
We are looking at the Jamaican example because it's a sister Caribbean country, and I think that it works. According to the information that we have received from Grace Kennedy, it is working in Jamaica. That is why they are pursuing in other parts, in other territories. In the ministerial task force, we have narrowed down some special commodities that we are looking at. And those are the first commodities that we will target, followed by other commodities in the Caribbean.
The Agriculture Minister says there has been no concrete decision yet on taking up the offer of crop insurance.
We are now at a discussion stage with a project that was implemented in Jamaica. We have set ourselves timeline by the second quarter of 2022 to conclude discussion. This has not been, we have not implemented anything as yet. Excuse me.
The proposing.
We are at a discussion stage where there is a policy or where there is a company that have started a project in Jamaica and where the Jamaican farmers have welcomed it, where I have had a number of discussions and discourses with our farmers in Guyana, and they are also looking forward to it.
Agriculture Minister Zulfikar Mustafa. Guyana's death toll from the coronavirus is now 1,075, and the figures show that there are now 1,000 new cases within the past 24 hours. Of the 109 persons who are hospitalized, 13 are seriously sick and are in the intensive care unit. There are now 7,462 persons who have been ordered to isolate themselves at home. 9 other persons have been quarantined. Police say a driver's salesman has admitted to staging a robbery because he was overworked and underpaid. He reportedly stole the money belonging to Fernandez Guyana Enterprise shortly before 6 p.m. on Monday. Investigators say that the account of the purported armed robbery on January 10th did not add up, and he buckled on the questioning. The 39-year-old man, who is employed by Fernandez Guyana Enterprise, eventually took police to a derelict vehicle in his yard and took out a bag containing almost $130,000. The money has since been lodged by serial number to be used as evidence. He has been arrested. The driver's salesman had originally alleged that two males on a white and gold Honda XR motorcycle without a registration number had robbed him at gunpoint. And over now to regional news. Trinidad and Tobago's opposition parliamentarian Dinesh Rambali calls for the importation of fireworks to be banned. The government has moved to amend the legislation governing fireworks in the wake of a devastating fire. We get more in this report from TTT News Online.
The proposed Fireworks Amendment Bill 2021 is far removed from what the public wants. This, according to Member of Parliament for Chaguanas West, Dinesh Rambali, as he discussed the bill on Wednesday's Now Morning show.
It is not a document which codifies any movement from what the existing law is to take it in the direction of where people are clamoring that they want it to be.
He noted that the only difference in the proposed bill lies in a regulation for where you can use fireworks and the introduction of a new time regime limit for its use.
What I think everybody's clamoring for as a solution is that you have to look at it as the banning of fireworks needs to be done at the source. So the best solution, and from what we are gleaning, it would be to stop the importation of fireworks unless you have appropriately issued permits, and the chain of custody of those permits would basically, it should require permits at all stages.
Mr. Rambali said proper implementation, policing and enforcement must be prioritized to ensure effectiveness.
That report from TTT News Online. As St. Lucia continues to experience the impact of COVID-19, the Office of St. Lucia's Director of Public Prosecutions has not prosecuted a single murder case since January 2020. The Director of Public Prosecution, Daisreen Green, says there are over 90 persons awaiting trial for the offense of murder, while they continue to struggle with the difficulty of finding appropriate housing for their courts. His remarks came in an address Tuesday during the virtual launch of the 2022 law year. Mr. Green explained that COVID-19 restrictions constrain jury trials. He disclosed that none of the courtrooms could accommodate the number of jurors required to try murder offenses while observing physical distancing measures. St. Lucia is experiencing the pileup of murder cases against the backdrop of a record number of homicides in 2021. And he explained that it was a matter of great concern that the remand population at the Bordelais Correctional Facility, BCF, significantly surpasses its penal population. According to the DPP, the correctional facility currently has 327 individuals on remand compared to 127 in its penal population. Cuba is sending health workers to the Bahamas to help that CARICOM member state grapple with the shortage of nurses. This is according to the Bahamas' Health Minister, Dr. Michael Darville. Details from Our News Bahamas.
According to Darville, the 50 nurses recruited from Cuba are expected to arrive in the country this week. It comes at a time when over 150 healthcare workers are in either quarantine or isolation.
This morning we had a number of somewhere between 160 to 180, I can't confirm. And with that being said, we placed the new protocols in, and so probably today some additional ones will come back into service. And I'm looking forward for the new 50 nurses from Cuba to be a part of the system to help us.
Latest official figures show that 800 persons have tested positive for COVID-19. The Bahamian health minister says that preliminary tests have confirmed that the highly contagious Omicron variant is in the archipelago. Figures show that so far 110 persons have been hospitalized with COVID. Several Caribbean countries are recording a more than 100% increase in the number of COVID-positive persons. We get that roundup from Antigua and Barbuda Radio's Garfield Bufford.
Latest figures from the Pan-American Health Organization, PAHO, show that 7 COVID-19 cases in Antigua and Barbuda have shot up by 137%. Well, PAHO's daily update for January 10 shows most countries in the region with increases in cases well over 100%. The British Overseas Territory of Anguilla has seen cases jump by a staggering 857% over the 7-day period, by far the highest in the Americas over the period. Other countries in the region with sharp rises are Guyana, where cases have surged by 409% over the 7 days, Cuba 371%, Guadeloupe 361%, and Grenada 253% over the 7-day period.
Garfield Bufford from the Antigua Broadcasting Service. And now in Belize, a commission of inquiry into the sale of government assets by the previous government is not entirely surprising. The 46-page report on the sale of government assets between October 2019 and November 2022 has been made public. Among those who had testified before the Commission of Inquiry had been former Prime Minister Dean Barrow and 3 former ministers between February and August last year. Details from Sabrina Daly of News 5 Live.
The Commissioner Chair, Senior Counsel Andrew Marshallek, told News 5 that the Commission found that none of the sales that took place under the previous administration were in compliance with the law. He explained that this was the case because the Ministry of Finance had adopted an informal procedure to sell off the assets. Because the process did not follow the legal guidelines for such sales, everyone who participated in those transactions, including 2 ministers of government at the time, were violating the law.
Sale of public assets is governed by the provisions of the Finance and Audit Reform Act, and it requires that the sales be done through one of 3 possible tendering processes: the open tender, the selective tender, or the limited tender. There wasn't an attempt to do any of it, so that all the sales fell afoul of the law. I know when people ask that, they generally ask it in the context of somebody being criminally charged or being punished for what happened. I don't think that can happen.
The Commission of Inquiry report also detailed the sale of vehicles from the government's vehicle care unit. Laptops and specially made furniture sold off during the period under investigation. Chairman Marshallek told us that the only transactions that the current government can pursue legally would be one involving a former minister.
Only aspect of what came out of the Commission's inquiries that we've recommended be further investigated with a view to possible criminal prosecution would arise out of the sale of the Tacoma to Honorable Hugo Pat and the relationship with Kelvin Lee, and the relationship, if any, that those had to the sale of government lands to Kelvin Lee. That would have been the most significant possibility where criminal behavior could have taken place, and it certainly needs to be looked into further.
Senior Counsel Andrew Marshallek ending that report from News 5 Live in Belize. He says that Belize needs to have a procurement law, even as he notes that a procurement handbook had been produced since 2010 but appears to have been largely ignored. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. A court in Germany has given a life sentence to a Syrian former colonel for crimes against humanity. Anwar Ruslan was found guilty of mass torture and killings at a notorious prison in Damascus. Mr. Ruslan was detained 2 years ago in Germany, where he'd successfully claimed asylum. Jenny Hill reports.
Anwar Raslan tried to start a new life in Germany, but justice caught up with him. The 58-year-old was a high-ranking Secret Service officer who in 2011 was working for the regime of President Bashar al-Assad as it violently crushed anti-government protests. Raslan presided over the brutal torture and killing of civilians who'd been detained at the notorious Al-Khatib prison in Damascus. Crimes considered so serious that they could be tried under the principle of universal jurisdiction outside of Syria in a foreign court. The ruling is significant, especially for those who survived Al-Khatib and have given evidence during the trial.
Novak Djokovic has been included in the draw for the Australian Open tennis tournament, even though it's still not clear if he'll be in the country to play. Australia's Immigration Minister Alex Hawke is still considering whether to deport Djokovic because of COVID rules. Russell Fuller reports.
In keeping with this Australian Open, the draw did not go off without a hint of drama when it was postponed indefinitely just 2 minutes before it was due to start. And with the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison due to give a press conference, people started to put 2 and 2 together, and perhaps we made 5, because the draw eventually took place 75 minutes later with Novak Djokovic in it, and Mirmir Kecmanovic of Serbia will be Novak Djokovic's opponent in the first round, should he be allowed to play by the Australian government.
Teachers in France have gone on strike in protest at the government's handling of the coronavirus crisis. Ministers have made keeping schools open a priority, despite a recent surge in COVID cases caused by the Omicron variant. Teachers have complained that the rules they're expected to follow in order to keep infection rates down are complicated and are constantly changing. Talks on a free trade agreement between Britain and India, which could be worth nearly $40 billion a year, have begun in Delhi. Britain sees striking a deal as a high priority following its departure from the European Union. Rajini Vaidyanathan reports.
British officials say everything's on the table when it comes to negotiating a trade deal with India. Recent reports suggested the UK might be willing to relax visa restrictions and costs for Indians to allow more to work and study in Britain. A more liberal visa regime is something India's likely to push for as part of a deal. But in the Commons last week, Boris Johnson dismissed the idea. One thing the UK wants is for India to reduce its high tariffs on imports of Scotch whisky and British-made cars.
You're listening to the World News from the BBC. Soldiers from a Russian-led alliance have begun leaving Kazakhstan after being deployed there last week to tackle nationwide unrest. A statement from the Defence Ministry in Moscow said more than 2,000 troops had started to withdraw. They were sent at the request of the Kazakh president after protests escalated into violence. A Canadian cybersecurity watchdog has concluded that the phones of more than half the journalists at an online publication in El Salvador were hacked by spyware only available to governments. The site, El Faro, has been in a long-running dispute with the Salvadoran president, Nayib Bukele, as our Central America correspondent, Will Grant, reports.
The online magazine El Faro has been the target of what its editors say are repeated attempts to smear and harm the publication since President Bukele took office, ranging from numerous financial audits to allegations of money laundering. The journalists at El Faro say it is because their reporting has revealed the Salvadorian government held talks in jail with gang leaders, something President Bukele and his ministers deny. However, this latest revelation will be difficult to dismiss so easily.
The armourer who was working on the Alec Baldwin film Rust when the cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot dead is suing the film's gun and ammunition supplier. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed accuses PDQ Arm and Prop and its founder Seth Kenny of selling her a cache of dummy ammunition with live rounds mixed in. Ms Hutchins was hit by a bullet fired by Alec Baldwin on set in October. British athletes taking part in the Beijing Winter Olympics are being offered temporary phones over fears they may be spied on while in China. The association said it feared the athletes' data could be at risk. It didn't say who would be spying on the competitors, but in China there are few legal constraints to stop surveillance by the authorities. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. The Caribbean private sector organization's suggestion that Guyana's local content law violates regional free trade rules has sparked a call for this country to leave the CARICOM single market. The Shadow Attorney General, Roysdale Ford, has represented the opposition leader in talks with the Commonwealth Secretary General. A man says he faked a robbery because he was overworked and underpaid. And in regional news, a Trinidad and Tobago opposition parliamentarian wants fireworks to be banned. And Cuba is rushing nurses to the Bahamas, where many of their local counterparts are COVID positive and off the job. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
Thank you for choosing News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM. Accurate information blended with great music.